Hey there, commercial construction coffee talk fans. Thanks for chiming in. My name's David Corse, and I'm your host. I'm also the publisher and editor of Commercial Construction and Renovation magazine. Actually, this is a relic. This is when I was called Retail Construction. This issue was from 2007. So I'm starting to bring out some of the archives here because I'm running out of my latest issues. But man, it used to look great. We went digital August of 2021. So, we no longer print the magazine, and we had 29 million people hit the website last year. So, I don't miss the printer and the post office and all that stuff, but I definitely miss holding the magazine in my hands. But, we're digital and you can always get it. And I want to thank everybody out there once again for pushing us over the 29 million mark. In November of 2022, we went over the 3 million mark for the month. So I know there's a lot of you out there consuming content and look at the magazine and everything else that we're doing on there. So really appreciate, starting the year off on a positive note and crossing the 20. Hopefully this year we'll go up to 30 million. So that's our goal. But anyway, I hope everybody's having a great week. Super Bowl Sunday, unbelievable game. I'm from Philly. All my friends are devastated. A couple of my friends went out to, Phoenix. They stayed at my mom's house. Had some good home cooked meals, and they came back devastated Sunday night. I got the text, we were robbed. The refs threw the game. They flew the flag at the end. The Zebras, I really have to say, they really need to keep the yellow laundry in their hand. That the game's on the line. I would have rather seen them not throw that flag. It was a ticky-tacky call. Not because I didn't want the Eagles, the Eagles to lose, but at the end of the game, it's got to be really, really a penalty like that. I'm an athletic guy. I still play lax and ice hockey. I was hoping that they wouldn't do that, and they did it. And but congratulations to the Chiefs. Listen, I liked the Chiefs when I was growing up. In Denver, they were our arch rivals, with the Donkeys, and I went to DU, so we call them the Donkeys, but they're the Broncos. Anyway, congratulations to them, all the power to them. They had a great season, and so did the Eagles. Both loaded. They'll probably both be back there next year. But the refs, they gotta let them guys play. It's the end of the game. Let them play, unless it's just blatant. Don't throw the flag. That's all I've got to say on that. But it was exciting. Went down to the wire. I told someone before the game on my last podcast, I said, 27-24, a field goal is going to win it. And sure enough, that's what happened. I was only a few points off. So ate some good wings and food. And, it was, the halftime, I kind of blew that off. I was doing some other things. But there's some fun commercials. Some good stuff that went back to the old days. So very entertaining. And all in all, a very fun event. And I, like I said, made the best team win. And look, they were both the best teams. So I have no problem with it. But football season's over, and springtime, it's lacrosse season for me. So DU took it on the chin. They lost to Air Force 12-10. They haven't lost to Air Force in 14 years. And unbelievable, they lost. They went down to Sea Springs and they lost. And but you know what? Maryland lost, Duke lost, a lot of teams lost last weekend. So the top 20, it's been shuffling around. And my DU Pioneers, they have to go on the road this week starting. They got to play Duke, UNC, they come back to play Merrimack, and then they go up to Yale. So the next 3 weeks, they could be 5-1, or they could be 1-5. Who knows? It's going to be. I know when they lost, it was a very Colorado Springs to DU or Denver up I-25 north, probably about an hour and a half, depending on where you're going. But I'm sure it was a long ride, and Coach Tierney was just letting them have it, because he's retiring this year after 42 years. And I know he wants to go out with a big bang and make it to the NCAAs, and losing that game was tough to watch. Oh, it was agonizing. And but University of Denver ice hockey swept North Dakota. We're number 4 in the country, and we're just cranking on the frozen pond, so I can't complain. And I've got my relic jersey of the Thrashers. They used to play in Atlanta. Now they play in Winnipeg. So when I brought out the old book, I figured, let's bring another archive out. So I got the old jersey on, the old looking magazine, and all that stuff. enough said. Let's start. Got a nice young lady up in Beantown, where they just had the Bean Pot. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's Harvard, BU, BC, and Northeastern, and they have this tournament at the Boston Gardens. Well, I don't know what it's called these days, but anyway, where the Bruins play and the Celtics. And anyway, it's unbelievable. It's sold out, and everybody from all the local colleges, they got their jerseys on. And I was lucky enough to go up there once into the Bean Pod, and I sat in one of my clients' boxes, and it was like the funnest thing I ever saw. Such rivalry, and actually Northeastern beat Harvard in overtime to win the Bean Pot. And they carried around the ice. So if you live in Boston, the Bean Pot is like the World Series or the Super Bowl. So it's a really a big gig, and it was nice to see Northeastern win it, because normally it's either BC or BU, or the perennial powers up there. So so I figured I'd throw a little local Beantown action. But today I've got Maren Reepmeyer. She's the vice president with SGA, which is an architectural design firm, and they do a lot of exciting projects. And Maren, say hello to our guests out there on Commercial Construction Coffee Talk.
Hello, and thank you for having me, David. I'm thrilled to be here today.
Yeah, actually, we were talking before we went live, and I found out some things. She lived in Denver, so we were talking where each other lived, and good story, and bringing back memories and of waist deep powder, and blowing down the back bowls in Vail or Aspen Highlands, and skiing the glacier. Actually, they have a glacier called St. Mary's out in Denver, and I skied it during the summer. And it was one of the coolest things.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Skiing out east is not the same. I will say it is not the same.
No. It's just cold. Listen, they have nice snow.
I see.
But there's nothing like waist deep or knee deep powder. It just blows off. Yeah. And there was one summer. It was like in the late 80s, or maybe it was the early 90s. But anyway, they closed the mountain in April because of the animal migration. So like the third week in April, the White River National Forest, they closed all the mountains out, and you can still do like Loveland Pass. A couple of those mountains are still open. Anyway, but it snowed so much in like the end of May, Memorial Day weekend. It snowed out of the blue. They opened up Vail, part of Vail, and I went up and skied, and I was like in snow, like up to here. It was unbelievable. And they never really do that. And but they did it that one time, and it was like the greatest thing that I ever did. And I think that's probably the deepest snow that I've done. And believe me, I was a bomber. I've skied every mountain in Colorado. I think Crested Butte probably is the steepest one that I think is out there. But it was a while. That I will remember for the rest of my life. Skiing in June in Colorado and waist deep powder. So
it's crazy.
Yeah. So anyway, pleasure being our guest. And the reason why I had Maren on was, we're starting the year out, and SGA is doing some exciting things, on the architecture design front. And so we wanted to get a perspective on, from the architecture's point of view, because listen, you can't do anything with building without having someone design and having, a foray in what something's going to look like, with a rendering and then seeing an actual, being built. So the way we're going to do it, I do it in 3 parts, Maren. You're going to tell your story, where you grew up, sisters, brothers, where you went to school, and how you ended up in with SGA. Then we'll talk about the last couple of years, lessons learned through the roller coaster that we all went through, and then one positive thought or phrase for our listeners, and then we'll close it out. So with that said, Maren, the floor is yours. Tell us your story.
Well, thank you, David. I think it's interesting. When people ask me this question, I always, think about humble beginnings. My story is one of those that has a humble beginning. I grew up in South Dakota in a teeny tiny little town, about 1,200 people at the time. And so, people say, well, how did you get to Boston, and you're working at this big firm in Boston, and what's that journey look like? I think, for me, I had the benefit of having 2 really great role models growing up, and those are my parents. Both were very hardworking, really appreciated scholarly things and good education and culture and being exposed to as many things as you could, And so I had that benefit. And I think I gleaned two really great things, one from each parent. My father was a mechanical engineer, and would design big machines that did manufacturing. It was very much a problem solver, get in there and get things done. He understood how things worked. He also has, after retirement, went on to design and build homes. So he does his own custom home thing just for fun. He builds a house and then he sells it to someone. So he's just kind of minded in that way. And then my mom was very much a very driven career, strong female leader at the South Dakota State University. And again, the work ethic and what she did, as a woman in business and really striving for the best, mentoring, bringing people up along the way. I think I learned so much. And I think in today's world, I'm really a good kind of 50-50 of my dad and my mom in that regard in my career. Went to school at the University of Minnesota, go Gophers. And in my mid-20s, I got a wild hair and up and moved to Colorado. That's the Denver connection. Loved it there. I went there. I sent resumes all over the country. I ended up there because of this amazing project. And I just fell in love with the sunshine. For those that don't know, the sun shines there, 360 days out of the year or something. And it just is such a wonderful place to be. I ended up working at a firm that did a lot of resort work. So it was really great fun to do work in places like Vail and Snowmass, Aspen. Winter Park was one of my big projects there. And so just really fun work. My career was taking off. I really had no intention of ever leaving. I had a great group of friends, just everything. Life was good. And then I went skiing one weekend in Vail, and along comes my husband, who is the reason why I'm in Boston. So, a year after dating, I ended up moving out here where he is from. And I've just learned to love Boston. It's been such a great place to live. There's so much richness and culture and architecture and everything.
That's great. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so it's been, as an architect, it's a great place to be. So my career here has been really focused on adaptive reuse projects. I've done a myriad of different things, but I found my true passion after coming to Boston, and that's in working in adaptive reuse. So that's where I am today. I joined SGA not too long ago, and they're a great company. I was at another firm in Boston for a long time, but they're a great company. And what really drew me to them was, their reach in terms of where they're doing projects, the types of projects they're doing, and really trying to build up a practice, that has diversity in the portfolio, diversity geographically. That we have offices in Boston and New York, so there's just a lot of great opportunity, a lot of great people there, and yeah.
So, knowing that you lived in Denver, what was your favorite place to ski? I got to ask, what was your favorite mountain?
I like skiing Vail. I actually love skiing Copper Mountain. Copper Mountain at the time, I mean, I've been in Boston 15 years now, but at the time, Mountain was one of the lesser known places, so less of a destination for outsiders. So you'll find a lot of locals on the mountain at Copper.
Yeah. When I was out there in the 80s, they used to have a thing called a ski merit card. And it was $1 for me during the week. You could go up to Loveland Pass, Winter Park, Mary Jane, and ski for $1. And from
Wow.
DU to Loveland Pass was about a 45-minute ride, up by 70. And they don't do that anymore because I know lift tickets are a fortune. But
They're a fortune.
yeah, when I grew up, before my parents had the house in Vail forever, but my uncle actually moved out to Vail in the late 60s. He actually built the town, my Uncle Carl, and he built just about all of Vail. I mean, residential, commercially, and
Right.
before the Eisenhower Tunnel was built, you'd have to go over the I-6, Loveland Pass to get
Yeah.
over on the other side. And
Yeah.
so we, I remember, Winter Park was a dinky little gig. Now it's
Yeah.
huge. And,
Yeah.
so much has been built up there. And now,
Yeah.
Vail has, they've all kind of merged. So you get the multi-pass and
Yeah.
so it's been amazing transformation to see that whole thing. And when you go by, what's it, Indigo Springs or whatever,
Mhm.
we'd always stop at the pizza place, but that was, an old little mining
Yes.
town. It's still probably,
Yes.
and,
Yes. I think
and
it's
Denver,
Idaho Springs.
Idaho.
Yes.
Thank you. I was,
Yes. Uh-huh. I'm trying
and
to remember the name of the pizza place. I
you
know
know what I'm
exactly what
talking
you're
about, right?
I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about. I think it starts with a B. I can't remember now.
Well, deep
Famous for
dish,
their pizza.
deep dish. I was
Deep
like,
dish.
deep dish, and you had to stop there and have pizza before you went back down.
Yes.
And and Denver is the same thing. They've got a lot of rich history. You got the rails, the Union Station down there, and the architecture, and then they've got the new stuff. And so it's you've had the best of both worlds. The Rockies are a little different than Beantown, but Beantown definitely is rich in history and architecture. And
Yes.
you kind of, I was going to say 1,200 people in South Dakota. I'm thinking that your family are farmers or something, but mechanical engineer and a woman entrepreneur. That's
Believe
crazy.
it or not, I was the city kid in my small town. We were not farmers.
Yeah. Well, you think it's small town, and but I'm sure it got cold in South Dakota in the middle of winter too, right?
Oh, I did. Yes, very cold. But there, the skiing, it was I can't remember. It's the flat skiing, Nordic skiing, not downhill
Cross
skiing.
country. Yeah, cross country. Uh-huh.
Cross country. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
A little different. I prefer the downhill.
Oh yeah. No, listen, what's funny is right when I left, snowboarding was coming into play, and they were kind of letting the snowboarders come onto the mountain. And
Yeah.
my wife and I, we took a snowboarding class. It was like the Broncos were playing the Packers in the Super Bowl. So whenever that was, it was the first one John Elway won. Anyway, we're up in Vail and we took this class, and there were about 20 people in the class. By lunchtime, half of them had dropped off because you fall a lot. And but
Yeah.
but the learning curve is really, really fast on snowboarding. So
Is it?
well, by the end, by the second, but in the afternoon, I was getting on the chairlift, and but I didn't like the way that the board hung on my leg. And
Yeah.
I'm a downhiller. I was a bomber. I like to
Yeah.
ski, but I can appreciate the snowboarding thing. But at least I know I can do it. But yeah, a lot of people by lunchtime they're like, I've had enough of this, man. I've fallen way too much. I'm gonna get hurt out here. And
Right.
but yeah, we stuck it out, and it's all practice, and but
Yes.
I'm a downhiller just like you.
Yeah.
I like the bomber.
Me
So
too.
so
Yeah.
let's talk about, you're up in Boston, it's March of 2020, everything gets shut down, and I'm sure, cranes everywhere, just like every other city. And, now 2.5, 3 years later, we're coming out of, the tunnel. And, listen, there's still some, stuff going on with the roller coaster, but talk about, how your company kind of weathered the storm and some of the lessons learned that, some of our listeners out there in commercial construction coffee talk could, maybe take and maybe apply that to their own, firms, whether it's company culture or, technology or, what have you.
Yeah, I think, for me, the first two things that come to mind are resiliency and empathy. To me, those are the two biggest things that have come out of this roller coaster. And I think there are things that affect us both on the micro scale and the macro scale. So resiliency from a personal perspective, from a people perspective, but also as a company, as a business, as a neighborhood, as a society, as the human race. I think it kind of those two things I think are common themes throughout. And I think at the end of the day, we're much better for those two things. What's amazing to me, and I still look back at this, is how the company I was with at the time, how we were so easily able to adapt with the technology. You know, everybody went home, and within 48 hours, every single person was set up at home with their equipment, able to work without skipping a beat. Amazing. I don't think we knew we could do that. You know, and nobody ever obviously anticipated that, but it still blows my mind that that happened. And I don't know the ins and out of it. I'm not the IT person or part of that group at all, but that's just amazing to me. And I think if we can do that, we can do anything. I think too, with architecture and the design, design services industries, it's interesting because of the timeline of things. You know, some businesses were impacted immediately and, had to do unfortunate things right away. For us, our projects go on for years, and, you're in a design phase for years. Your entitlements could take years. Construction certainly takes years. So your projects are at any stage in the game. And I think getting in the mind of our clients, where are you spending those dollars? I think everyone is thinking about the risk when that happened. All our clients are, how long is this going to go on? I think, well, all of us were. But in terms of where is it time to go on hold, or do I just plow through? In my industry, in my particular practice, we're fortunate to be working with companies that are Fortune 500 companies. They are looking at the long game. They're not necessarily looking at the short game. And one of the biggest projects I was taking up most of my time in March of 2020 was a very, very large scale adaptive reuse project in Boston for a financial institution that's a Fortune 500. And we were 5 months out after being, I think our design phase was, gosh, we were 3 years in to our design phase. We had 5 months left to go till we issued permit drawings. And then we were off to the races with construction, 4-year construction project. So 5 months from issuing CDs, we didn't skip a beat. We all got up to speed on our home laptops and our home setups and just plowed through. Our project is one of the first ones in our firm to issue, a full set of construction documents in a time when everybody was working from home. That too is something we didn't know we could do that. We didn't think we could do that. We thought there would be all kinds that we're going to need an extension. We're not going to be able to collaborate. How are these details going to come together? It was a lot of unknowns, but you know what? We just did it and it was seamless. It still blows my mind that I know, how did we, those drawings went out. They were great. It was over 1,000 pages in the set of drawings. It just, all our consultants came together. It's as if nothing happened. We just weren't in the same room together. So the project kept going. There was no hiccups at all. It was amazing. Still under construction. Amazing project. Some other projects weren't as fortunate, but I think, it's all scalable. And you have, again, depending on which industry you're in, or if you're in architecture, if you're working at a smaller firm, working with smaller clients, smaller projects, it's probably a different story. My particular story is one where we were in a spot where it didn't really, dare say, it affect us that much.
When I was going to do my podcast, I was going to do one a month and go out on the construction site and interview people. And then this thing happened. And so I started doing these, I never done one before. I learned. I look back at some of my earlier, episodes. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I learned. I just kind of winged it. And but all the people I've talked to over the last couple of years, contractors, brands, entrepreneurs, whoever they were, the people that turned on a dime and figured things out quickly, those were the ones that survived survive the best. A lot of people worried about company culture. Are people going to be able to work from home? Everybody said that they've been more productive. They don't have the gossip at the water cooler, or all the stuff, and meetings go much quicker. technology just like we're using today. It's an amazing thing. It's not going away. I know people get, oh, I'm sick of Zoom or Teams or whatever platform that you might be on, but it's so much easier to do one of these than make an hour-and-a-half drive for a 15-minute meeting, or do a FaceTime with someone to look at it, something on the project. I think that's been an amazing transformation. And also it was a catalyst for a lot of brands that to get rid of some old, dog stores that needed to go. I always say when you look at the paper and they say, oh, so-and-so's closing 20 stores, but then 4 paragraphs in, yeah, but they're opening up, 15 more brand new prototypes. And, that's the whole reuse thing. Someone else is going to go and take that space, come in, put their new paint, carpet, signage, rebrand it. Maybe it's a completely different, type of, business that's going to be in that facility. So for my thinking, like I went from print to face to digital. So I'm a completely different company than I was in 2 years. I was lucky I had a digital magazine. I ignored it. I was lucky I had it. I used to keep it. I had it, and I didn't even know I had all that content until one of my agents guy goes, "Hey man, are you still living down? You got all this content. You need to do this with it." So it go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, but I will say, so it's interesting. So that was kind of how we got over the hurdle of how we're going to work. But I will say, getting back to the reuse piece that you just mentioned again, is that I think we are though seeing a difference today in our cities, in urban cores. There are office buildings that are seeing vacancies much more than ever before because of how we're working. Everything is hybrid now. And that's leading to vacancies, which is changing our industry and is changing a little bit of how we're thinking about things and approaching things, and how what kind of projects our clients are going after. And with those vacancies, people are thinking, what am I going to do with this, large urban tower in the core of the financial district or what have you? And that's where these, conversion projects come in. Again, as you were saying. So I think we're, just at the point where we're going to be seeing, there's already been a fair number of them, across the nation. We're seeing this as a trend, San Diego, San Francisco, Chicago, DC is another big one, and specifically with office to resi, and because of these vacancies, but then also pair that with the notion or this fact really that we're having a housing crisis across the nation. Again, city after city, you read articles, and when you're there, you can see it. These cities want their streets activated. They want to bring the people. So, different administrations and jurisdictions are doing things to incentivize these conversions, to incentivize bringing retail back, bringing, pedestrians back. And I think it's really an exciting time. At SGA, we're well poised to help with those things. We have a very robust team that is, that does that type of work. We're experts in what to look out for. Even if someone is thinking about doing this with their own asset or thinking about acquiring certain assets to uplift their portfolio, we're very good and nimble at going in and helping them, determine whether or not this particular asset or portfolio of assets are prime candidates for that. Some are not. It can be very costly and challenging, depending on the size and shape of your building, where it's located, what kind of infrastructure you have. We're seeing it across class A, B, and C. Certain buildings are just more apt, and because of their infrastructure and the shape and size of the building lend themselves more easily for these conversions.
The biggest thing that I saw coming out of the last 3 years was that real estate, commercial real estate, if you were a building owner and you had tenants and that business had they had everybody work, depending on what state you were in, determined, the volatility of who's working and who's not. Construction, those guys, we didn't miss a beat. I mean, everything was essential. They were still getting on planes. Okay, they had to wear a mask and that kind of stuff. So people in construction and architecture, engineers, civil and federal, that stuff just went on. You just had to deal with all the regulations to travel and so forth. But the biggest thing that happened was after they let people work at their homes, then they wanted them to come back to the office, and they didn't. And people don't want to go back to the office, or I should say it that way. They want to. They want to go to sporting events. They want to go to rock concerts. They want to go to the beach. They want to do all these things, but they don't want to go back to the office. So here you are. What do I do as the owner? I'm upper management. I want to keep my company culture. I want to have my people in there. They've proven themselves that they can work at home. Do I do a couple days a week in hybrid? Do I get rid of my real estate and, pony down? And then if we're gonna have a meeting, I can always, rent a space someplace. Do I get rid of my employees and hire off? Sure. Will I have the same quality? And which I wouldn't suggest you do, but I'm sure that, those discussions go on. And that's the conundrum that a lot of people are in, depending on what city. I look back when I was in Denver in the early 80s, it was right after the oil boom went bust, and Denver had all these buildings that were empty. Now I go back 20, 30 years later, packed. Okay. So I look at today, maybe maybe they convert it to residential. Maybe it becomes the ground floor becomes an auto show, a dealership, all of that stuff, especially like movie theaters, they got to reinvent themselves and figure out, and I think that's one of the most exciting thing from, being on that planning, like, you're an architect design. So you're in that planning phase of, you've got that vision of what the future will look like. I mean, just like the restaurant industry, you won't even recognize, quick serve in the next couple of years, because they don't even want to do dining rooms anymore. They just want to do drive-throughs and
it's crazy.
So all these buildings that have these vacancies, what they do with them is going to change the face of what things look like. You
absolutely
take a quick image in your mind of what your own city looks like, and 10 years from now, look at it, and then you'll see the transformation that occurred. I was just down. I went to the HVAC show last year, and I was in Atlanta. Huge, just jam packed with people. Anyway, I haven't been downtown. I live about 30 miles out of Atlanta. So I've seen since I was here before the Olympics. So I saw everything get built. Where I lived in 92 when I came down here, or 93, whatever it was, this was the boondocks. Now urban sprawls come out, just like Denver and Sea Springs, all built up. And some of the stuff is new. Some of the buildings have been old. They've been restored, and they've kept that architecture. And but it's amazing. When I went downtown, I hadn't been downtown in a while, and I parked by the Congress Center, but then traffic. I just kind of went around, and it was interesting to see kind of the vibe that was going on in the city. It was busy because the show was in town, but there were some things that had changed. And some good, some not. But all in all, I hadn't been down there in a while. And it was, I told my wife when I got home, I was like, hey, you haven't been down there in a while. When you drive through there, you're going to be like, wow, that's changed. And it's interesting, and you don't know unless you go down there.
Right. And I think what we're seeing too, and I think this trend is going to continue, is this thing that we've been calling a super hybrid. So this mix of uses, one example is life sciences. Of course, life sciences, if you're in the design industry and construction industry, that area has been booming, in the last several years, just completely booming. And we're seeing a little bit of a softening in the market right now, but we're anticipating that that need is still there. And so there's still going to be that growth, but you're starting to see life science, where it used to be in dedicated clusters, kind of on its own. It wasn't integrated.
Yeah, they were in like a technology park or whatever. Yeah.
Right. And now it's weaving its way. We're seeing a lot of conversion projects with labs and life sciences. And I think, even in these urban, office towers, which you would never expect, like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, you would have never thought that was going to happen. That's happening. But in terms of this kind of super hybrid model, you're getting mixes of resi, life science, retail, office. entertainment. It's this whole conglomerate of things that are now all of a sudden being housed, in one building. It's amazing. And I think we're just going to be seeing more and more of that, with more diverse mix of uses within a particular area, within a particular building, neighborhood, what have you. I think that you're right. I think this is really going to change the face of our cities and our spaces, our, really that public realm.
The last couple of years, I think it's been probably, one of the most exciting times that I've seen just in construction, because first people didn't know how long things were going to last. They didn't know what to do. They kind of winged it, and then went up and down on the roller coaster, depending on what it was. And then now we're, out of the tunnel, and now we're kind of just, chugging along, and, we've got other hindrances. You got labor shortages, you got products and all that other stuff. But, we're in construction. You just deal with it, and you roll with the punches. And, but the whole design aspect, and like I said, that real estate component is such a mind-boggling thing. I'm sure they've had some stressful nights, thinking,
Yeah.
oh my God, what am I going to do with all these vacancies? What are we going to do? People are just canning in their keys. We're done with having people in the office, or I'm doing a hybrid or whatever. And so that whole real estate component, and once again, they're all tied to the hip. Construction, I had a project management guy on my podcast. He goes, construction, you look at the life cycle of a building. Construction is like your fingernail. The planning stage, and then you got construction, and then once the building, then you got facility maintenance, and then the reuse is going to come in down the road. Like every 3 to 5 years, a retailer is going to they're going to do a refresh or whatever it might be, whether it's FF&E, carpet paint, whatever, new logo. But retailers that aren't growing or dying, they got to keep the stockholders, happy. So everybody's trying to reinvent themselves, regardless of, every 3 to 5 years. Now you got this other thing that's kind of been thrown in, the wrench in the cog, and you got all this vacancy. What do we do with it? We don't need to build more square footage. We got to use the stuff that's there, fill it up, and then go back to it. But maybe you do it both at the same time. I don't know. We'll find out, because we live it every day.
Yeah. But I think the other, part that I'm kind of impassioned about is the sustainability story of, adaptive reuse and conversion projects. And just such a strong believer. Again, I think there's some good things that have come out of this roller coaster, and that being one of them. That I think there's a great message about being stewards of the earth. And I think if we could reuse buildings, and we as designers can be very creative in that, I think more so than some may know or realize, and to give really great outcomes. But I think the sustainability, helping embodied carbon, so that those numbers aren't through the roof. I think there's good stories that are coming of this trend too, from that regard.
If there was one positive thought or phrase before we close out our episode here, that you would like to leave with our commercial construction coffee talk fans out there, what would it be as we close out Q1, going into Q2 and the remainder of 2023?
I don't know. I think I'm generally a very optimistic person, and I'm very excited about what's to come here. I think you're right. I think our cities are changing, our spaces are changing. Everything is becoming more adaptable and more flexible, and I think that allows us as human beings to be more flexible and adaptable, and have better work-life balance. And again, I think there's a lot of positives coming out of this. But I would say that, for me, I had to think about one thing, and this really, I had to give my husband some credit, but, set a destination, enjoy the journey, be an authentic person, and, help others along the way. And I think it's just good, lots of good things to come.
Optimism. I like it. The glass is not half empty. It's half full.
It's half full, people.
It's not partly cloudy, it's partly sunny,
Yes.
And in Denver, in the summer, it's going to have a thunderstorm in the afternoon, but it's going to be sunny, and 20 minutes later.
Exactly.
So,
Yes.
listen, I like optimism. I mean, as an athlete, I was optimistic this weekend that DU was going to come back and tie Air Force, but it didn't happen. But I was optimistic going into the fourth quarter. I'm like, come on, guys. But listen, if you're not optimistic and I took this digital class and just picked up a lot of stuff. But the biggest thing that they were talking about was mindset. Keep yourself positive, have fun.
Yeah.
You're not having fun, go do something else.
Yeah.
And don't be negative. And so I like the optimism thing. That's and I'm very optimistic. I think that even with the hindrances that are going on with inflation and labor and product and this and that, I just think that you can't control that.
Right.
It's out of your control. So you might as well just focus on the things that you can control. And one of them is optimism. So I'm going to take that to heart. If someone wanted to get in touch with you,
Sure.
firm, what would the best way for them to reach out if they wanted to bounce some ideas about maybe using some reuse buildings that they have or what have? How would they contact?
Absolutely. Go to our website. It's SGA-ARCH.com.
Okay. And
So
listen,
we're on all kinds of social media platforms. You can find us on LinkedIn. Just look up SGA, LinkedIn, Instagram, all of those.
so if you have any buildings that you think that might be good, good candidate for some reuse, or how you go about it, or you were thinking about it, if you've got a decent portfolio, or even if you're in real estate and you're thinking about getting, gosh, what am I going to do with all this stuff? Maren's there for you up in
Give me a
Beantown.
call. I'm happy to talk you through it.
If anybody wants to reach me, I'm at David C at ccr-mag.com. I know you hate me saying this, but I'm going to tell you, if it's like playing the lottery, if you don't buy a ticket, you can't win. If you don't send me something, I can't look at it. I know it's very tough to get in the magazine, but we have tons of social media. I look at everything. And it could be a charity golf tournament, it could be a personal announcement, it could be a cool project site, anything. By all means, send it to me, and I look at everything, and I will come back to you. If I post it or whatever, I'll send you the link, and you can post it. It's a win-win. So we love seeing that stuff. Send it to me because we look at it. Well, this has been a pleasure. I'm talking to a South Dakotan, a skier, a beantowner, a visionary. And you met your husband on the mountain. My mom met my stepdad on the mountain. That was a great story. And it's very cool to hear that kind of stuff. You just
maybe we'll catch you on the slope sometime, David.
Yeah, when we had our house up in Chestnut Hill, outside of Boston, we used to like Waterville Valley up in New Hampshire. That would be a cool. It was a nice, about an hour, depending on the.
Not too far.
Yeah, not too far. Good place to say. Listen, Vermont, it's cold, a little cold, a little further up, but Waterville Valley, I used to like that. New Hampshire, that was a nice place to ski. And one of my buds that I went to school with, he's got a place in Jackson Hole. So he lives in Cincinnati in the summer, but he goes out to Jackson Hole during the winter. He's been bugging me. He's like, dude, man, you got to come out, man. I said, look, I just sold my house and I moved, and I got rid of my, I still had some of my 207 K2s, and I got rid of all my skis and my boots, and I said, look, man, I'll just rent when I'm demoing them out there. I'm not going to drag you that stuff where I used to do it.
Right.
So, well, Maren, pleasure speaking with you. And today's hump day, and we're looking at the rest of the week. For all you out there, enjoy the rest of the week. It's almost you got another. Listen, it's almost the end of February. It's amazing how time flies, and before you know it, it's going to be spring, summer, and then the end of the year. The days are just blowing by. Boom, boom, boom. So make the most of it. If you're out there on a construction site, make sure you drink lots of water and be safe. And that's the most important thing with us, being in this sector. So, Maren, say goodbye from Boston.
Goodbye. Thank you so much, David. It really was a pleasure. Thank you.
And I'm going to sign off from Sugar Hill, just below the Beaufort Dam, up by Lake Lanier, about 25 miles north of Atlanta. And Everybody, have a great rest of the week, and we will see you on another episode of Commercial Construction Coffee Talk. And Maren, I look forward to meeting you when I come up to Boston. Probably, I think I got a gig there in the summer, so hopefully we'll get to meet in person. All right.
Look me up.
All right.
Definitely.
All right,
Thank you.
everybody. We will see you next time. See ya.